You ready to start? Good morning, everybody, and welcome, Chief Constable, to you and your team to this first meeting in public for the Policing Board of 2025. It seems like an absolute age since our last meeting in December, and as we all know, a lot has happened in policing since then, and indeed a lot has happened in the whole world since then that has the potential of making many changes to all of us. I have a range of issues to discuss, and I will keep my opening remarks very brief, and I know, Chief Constable, you'll be doing the same. I'm going to open with recruitment, and that's good news that the campaign for police officers and call handlers are now open. As a board, we fully support this campaign and urge people from all walks of life to step forward and make a positive change to policing. Through the series of real engagement and listening events known as real events that are held, there has been a really positive engagement through outreach programs to people and individuals across many sections of our communities. Good discussions around policing issues have taken place, and could I thank everybody who has turned up to those events, attended those events, and those who have supported, including members of this board who have attended many of those events, so thank you. Regrettably, as you know, Chief Constable, the campaign was subject to online racist and sectarian commentary, which was very strongly condemned. Our police service must be representative and must reflect the makeup of the community that it serves, and we must call out behaviours that are not appropriate, however they manifest. That leads me into the Power to Change campaign, which was launched last week, a campaign focusing on the need to challenge and change attitudes towards women. There is now a very welcome momentum and commitment within government and within communities and wider society to tackle the underlying issues which contribute to violence against women and girls. And in the same way that racism, sectarianism, and indeed all hate crime must be called out, and so too must misogynistic behaviours and attitudes. I'm going to move on to now the McCulloch Review. The important McCulloch Review, an interim progress report, has been published by Angus McCulloch KC, and thank you, Chief Constable, for sharing that with us. We understand and we have been advised that the delivery date is not going to be 31 March. So as a board, we obviously want to give Mr McCulloch adequate time to conduct his review, and we'd welcome an update on a realistic date for delivery of that review. As you will also be aware on this issue, it is now subject to an inquiry by the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, and this board has made a submission to that committee. The important issue of resourcing remains on the table. And just this week, we have written to the Justice Committee, who are currently scrutinising the budget for this current year, 25-26. We also provided a further response to the follow-up inquiry being conducted on the challenges facing public sector funding in Northern Ireland. It is a highly improved financial picture for policing, but there are still many, many pressures. And with a 5-year policing plan coming into play at the start of April, for a service operating on a 1-year budget situation, it remains grossly impractical and totally nonsensical. I want to move on to the review of the Northern Ireland Policing Board. The Justice Minister published the independent review, and the board has had sight of that. We've had some initial discussions on the findings, but we will be taking further time to discuss the review with yourself as well as the Justice Minister and other stakeholders, and we will be considering next steps, and we look forward to your input on that regard. As you know, I always like to finish on a positive, and this week I want to talk about the officers who selflessly rescued people from the house fire in Dungannon. They are to be commended, stepping forward and saving lives. I never cease to be humbled by the very hard work and bravery of the officers of the police service. Also, I would like to pay tribute to the PSNI officers and staff who worked through the recent storm, and I'm going to try and pronounce this, Eowyn, to establish public safety along with emergency services and organisations. And I want to particularly call out ACC Beck, well done for leading the operation in such a professional way, and thank you. So now, Chief Constable, over to you if we can have some very brief remarks and then we'll move to questions.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to everybody and everybody watching online. So you'll see from my latest report that the PSNI has begun 2025 largely where we left off in 2024, working extremely hard in challenging circumstances and under significant resourcing pressures while seeking to keep everyone safe. We undertook major policing operations over the Christmas and New Year periods, and most recently the PSNI led the emergency services response to Storm Eowyn. Throughout this period, the police services continued to go above and beyond serving the people of Northern Ireland. As you mentioned, Chair, as recently as Monday, you will be aware that police officers entered a burning house in Dungannon to save 4 people trapped inside, including 2 children. Officers arrived before the fire brigade, got ladders from neighbouring homes and entered that property at considerable risk to themselves. 8 officers were treated in hospital for smoke inhalation and 2 of the family remain seriously ill in hospital. Our thoughts very much remain with the family. I've spoken personally to each officer and thanked them for their colossal bravery. I kept hearing back in return that they were simply doing their jobs and what they joined the service for, to keep people safe. Each officer had no regard for their own safety and literally entered that house not knowing if they would come out alive. They heard the cries of those inside and immediately put their own lives at risk. It's these actions that define this organisation. It takes something special to run towards danger into a burning building. This is not a normal reaction and we should never take it for granted. I'm incredibly proud to be their Chief Constable and I hope people appreciate how lucky we are to have our officers and staff. Yesterday, you will have noted we charged a 21-year-old man with arson regarding that incident. You'll be aware of a shooting in Newton Abbey on the 6th of January in which an off-duty police officer was injured. Our investigation into this incident still continues, but a 29-year-old man has appeared in court charged with a number of serious offences, including attempted murder of the police officer. I'm limited in what I can say due to ongoing proceedings, but I've met and I'm very proud of the officer's actions during that incident and others who assisted him that evening. Following surgery, the officer's been discharged from hospital and we continue to support him and his family. This incident and the events in Dungannon on Monday serve as a reminder to all of us of the dangers your police officers face. Policing is a fantastic career. It is a job like no other, and it's a job that many people simply cannot do. It's vital that we support these working officers and staff who courageously perform day in, day out by providing them with the resources and numbers they deserve. My report to the board this month again emphasises that officer numbers have been allowed to decline to an unprecedented and dangerous level of 6,300 through underfunding. You are aware of our initial plan to recover officer and staff numbers to 7,000 and 2,572 respectively over the next 3 years. To that end, I'm absolutely delighted, as you mentioned, Chair, that we launched our first recruitment campaign for 4 years on the 22nd of January. We are accepting applications for student officers until the 12th of February, and we are also now accepting applications for call handling staff until the 17th of February. I'm sure we might talk about this more in questions, but both campaigns are going well. At the beginning of this week, we had received 3,100 student applications from all over Northern Ireland, and the call handler campaign has already attracted 262 applications. I want to encourage people from all of our fabulous communities who might be interested in joining to view the PSNI website for further information. Come and talk to us and see if you have what it takes to be part of the best public service a person can do. We are determined to be reflective of the communities we serve. This campaign is a hugely positive development, and the actual recruitment cannot come soon enough. I really do want to thank this board, though, for backing me, this organisation, and all the cross-party political support that we've received for this campaign. If in the past somebody from a particular background thought it was not possible to join the police in Northern Ireland, please think again. Put those thoughts aside and come and talk to us. Be part of this incredible organisation. Come and make a positive difference to the future of all of our communities in Northern Ireland. The issue of finance remains a critical one. We'll have to find a way to pay for the recruitment of officers and staff. The additional cost to recover our workforce levels is around 200 million over the next 5 years. As the board knows, I continually set out the consequences of the organisation not being able to keep people safe due to our significantly reduced and dangerously low workforce numbers. This board rightfully holds me to account for everything that we do. Such a process becomes somewhat unworkable and more of a damage limitation exercise if we do not have the resources to police Northern Ireland. We have a projected funding gap of 101 million against our budget for next year. I've been pressing hard for an opening budget that accounts for these identified pressures. We have now been allocated 86 million. That leaves a shortfall of 15 million. So I will once again be pushing hard for in-year funding to address that gap. We continue to make the case for sufficient and sustainable funding in Stormont and Westminster, and I appreciate the continuing Policing Board support on the issue of finances and indeed of the Justice Minister. However, I cannot be any clearer that the implications of inadequate policing numbers have already had a serious impact on victims of crime, local communities and our workforce. This will only get worse without the recovery of our police numbers. It's for that reason that our next 5-year policing plan will focus on victims, communities and our workforce. One area I've repeatedly expressed my concern about is our ability to protect people is violence against women and girls. The scale of the problem is clear to all of us. Our officers responded to 2,115 reports relating to violence against women and girls during our Christmas operation alone. However, worryingly, we have unprecedentedly low numbers in the investigative parts of the organisation that deal with these high harm offendings, crimes such as violence against women and girls, and indeed the numbers who manage serious offenders. I continue to have very real concerns that, in spite of the best efforts of our people, which you see day in and day out, women will come to harm who should not. In spite of this, I want to reassure this board that tackling violence against women and girls is and will remain one of the Police Service of Northern Ireland's organisational priorities. And working with the Department of Justice and the Executive Office, I was delighted to announce that we launched the new campaign to tackle gender-based violence recently. This Power to Change campaign challenges men and boys across Northern Ireland to check and change their behaviours towards women and girls. Evidence shows that if we allow misogyny to fester in our communities, more women and girls will suffer. This is not acceptable. A dedicated website has been developed to support this campaign, and I encourage everyone to visit the website, watch the videos and use the toolkit to promote the campaign. At the launch event, an incredibly brave and inspirational survivor told me and later the audience that her abuse did not start with a punch. The unacceptable attitude and behaviour of abusers form from their early years as boys and young men. Those attitudes need calling out. I strongly recommend the campaign to everyone. I just want to quickly take a moment to acknowledge the opening of the Omagh bomb inquiry. Like everyone in this room, I've been incredibly struck by the moving testimony of families since the inquiry began. The impact of this atrocity on the victims and their families has been laid out in stark terms and heartbreaking ways. The victims have been in all of our thoughts, I'm sure, daily. I want to reiterate that the PSNI will fully support the inquiry to help families understand and get to the truth of what happened to their loved ones. To end my opening remarks on a positive note, in January, 5 colleagues were honoured in the King's New Year's Honours List, with 2 MBEs and 3 King's Police Awards, including one to ACC Mel Jones. This was a richly deserved recognition for each of the recipients, and I want to congratulate each of them. These awards are given for exceptional public service, and this is precisely what is in the DNA of the officers and staff of the PSNI. You mentioned in your remarks, Chair, about the McCulloch Review Progress Report. In the last paragraph of that report, Angus McCulloch indicates that he will inform me at the beginning of March the timings of his final report to help clarify the position for you and the board today. And like the board, I have provided a submission to the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee's examination of surveillance of journalists and the safety of journalists, and I've offered to give evidence to that commission. And I'm now happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chief Constable, for that very comprehensive overview of the situation. Can I come in with a question first before we move to members? On the budget, your position this coming year is slightly improved, as I said earlier, but there still remains a fairly significant gap. Can you talk us through the implications if that gap isn't plugged?
So this organisation has already conducted a number of exercises of reducing numbers, which we know the implications of that, and you have held this organisation to account where I think there's a direct correlation of not having sufficient officers and staff, which means we have failed people. Our officers and staff are incredibly tired. We may talk about attendance management and sickness levels in this meeting. We're doing everything we can to address that, but put simply, there's nowhere else to cut. Where there is places to cut, we're in the process of doing whatever we can to reduce those headline costs, okay? Some of that involves some of our protection units and areas where we are not focused on the strategic intentions of being victim focused, communities focused and workforce focused. But put simply, we need to build on our budget, not reduce our budget. If we don't get the £15 million that we need, and by the way, that factors in the increase for the first year of the recovery plan. So the good news is we are going ahead with that with the funding that we've been provided, okay? But again, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, to only have 1 year funding, to try to plan for this organisation, to future-proof this organisation for the next decade or 2 decades, whether that be estates or workforce, is almost impossible on 1 year funding. We need to have some sort of comprehensive spending review process so that we can properly calculate what this organisation needs. And that includes establishing the headcount of this organisation, because the 7,000 officers falls considerably short of where we ultimately need to be. So I am determined to, as we did in this financial year, plug the gap that exists for this organisation. And you might recall, we recovered through monitoring rounds an additional £120 million. I think that's about 15% of our budget. But we've got to get on with policing Northern Ireland, not fighting for money. It distracts us and it provides uncertainty for a workforce that deserves certainty. So we will fight for that £15 million, and I'm confident somehow by hook or by crook we'll achieve it. But it's no way to conduct a business as important as policing.
Thank you, Chief Constable. I'm going to move for the first question, and before I do that, can I remind members again of the need to ensure questions do not stray into individual misconduct cases, ongoing pony investigations and ongoing judicial proceedings, or involve personal data of individuals or organisations. So I'm going to move to Brendan for the first question on artificial intelligence, I believe.
Thanks, Chair. Chief Constable, we'll all be aware of the rapid advances in artificial intelligence and in turn the opportunities these present in our daily and working lives. along with the potential risks associated with them as well. And I was interested to hear recently a news report from an inquest hearing that the PSNI was using artificial intelligence to review CCTV footage. So I was wondering, in terms of the opportunities that AI presents, could you outline for the board where AI is currently being used by the PSNI to enhance service delivery and reduce demand on officers and staff, and give us some sense of the impact it is having, and also what other areas are likely to see the adoption of AI applications in the future?
Well, I very much welcome the question. Just before Christmas, Brendan, the senior team explored where we are in the progress of the use of AI, both now and for the future. And we received a really powerful presentation from our head of ICT. And we will ensure that the board receives that same presentation, which will go into considerable detail. I'm also alive, by the way, with regards to artificial intelligence, of the risks that it brings around accountability. You hold us to account. I know there are some concerns with regards to commercial sensitivities and non-disclosure agreements from companies around the use of AI. This is a human rights-based organisation, so wherever we use AI, we need to be alive to the issues and concerns where it may not operate in the way that we want it to. We want to make sure we have controls with regards to the software and the algorithms that come with it. So conscious of those issues, we are very much an organisation that uses AI to save ourselves costs and resources. But I'm going to bring Mark in. Mark's going to give you some details about what exactly we're doing.
Thank you. So our published digital strategy actually is a key element within it, which concentrates really on us utilising artificial intelligence in its broader sense. So I think it's probably worth saying that in the past number of years we have embraced that new technology, and we do have practical use cases in a number of areas. So on top of the CCT, which Brendan mentioned, we're using it, for example, in our firearms licensing function, where we're using robotic process automation in the background 24/7 to help us do background and suitability checks to speed up the whole process, which reduces demand on staff and also provides a better offering to citizens. We're using it in an area which is really has a lot of potential for the use of AI, which is in contact management centres. And we're currently using the technology of the RPA to generate automatic email updates to, again, staff and anyone who's interacting with us. And I think over the last 4 weeks, we've had about 14,000 of those incidents, for example. And just recently, before Christmas, we launched our voice-to-text technology. And again, that just takes digital recordings and translates that into text, which is then available for officers to use. But it gets being done twice as quickly as what a human can do it. So there are those non-contentious areas where we're utilising that technology already. And as we look to the future, of course, really the possibilities are endless, but we're already in the foothills of looking at how we can utilise the technology to look at areas such as mobile phone analysis, which is really just a demand which is swamping all services. But even in simple areas like developing practical teaching plans in the college. So those kind of very day-to-day basic tasks can also be assisted by this technology. So I suppose what we're doing with the resources that we have, Brendan, is trying to focus those in those kind of non-contentious areas as the technology develops, and then utilise it to really support the new service operating model and also our transformation programme to make sure that we're getting best use of the resources that we have. But we could do more, and as part of the business case for recovery, we would hope to recruit potentially some more additional resources, specialists in this area, because the opportunities are really vast. But we're happy to come, as the Chief says, and maybe talk more about that at the Resources Committee.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to the presentation at Resources.
Thank you. I'm going to move to Frank on a question regarding officer training dealing with vulnerable people.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So, Chief Constable, can you share with us the specific training that officers undergo to ensure they deal with the most vulnerable members of our society in the most sensitive and caring manner? Now, especially I'm including the alarming increase in our children and our young people who are being diagnosed as part of the spectrum, autism spectrum. And can you, if you're able to, can you share with us any update on the incident involving 4 police officers who assisted in the removal of a young lady from a record shop in Lisburn prior to Christmas?
Yeah, of course, Frank. Thank you. I'll start, if I can, in the order that you asked the question. So, firstly, around the training and vulnerability, around about 5% of people in Northern Ireland will be diagnosed as having autism. There's been a real focus in policing generally, but I would say Northern Ireland especially, around autism and neurodiversity. And this organisation is determined to be victim focused. And when we say victim focused, that's particularly towards vulnerable victims and people who have particular needs that we need to be aware of. I do want to acknowledge, actually, before I'm going to hand to Claire to go into some details, but the work that's been done by our own autism and disability support groups in this space, who I've met and only very recently showed me a sensory box, of which they have purchased 35 for our frontline officers, which give officers who are going to calls, and because of our ever more and continually improved understanding of people who we go to deal with when we get calls who may have specific needs, these offer distraction techniques, reassurance techniques. In this box are all sorts of items that provide people with the comfort that will allow a diffusing of a situation. And I had an incredible presentation on that very recently. And that's because our people care about this. Also, last year, working with Autism Northern Ireland, we provided 4 different training packages for our staff online. I myself did some of this last year, working with Kerry Boyd, and who's heads Autism Northern Ireland. And subsequent to the incident, which I'll talk about in a moment when I've handed over to Claire for some more details about the training, I've had a conversation with Kerry about what more we can do in the training field. I've shared that with Pamela, and we're looking to do some additional training above and beyond what we've already done. But just to reassure this board, and I think you would all know it anyway, we joined this organisation to look after people who need to be looked after, and that often is people like that young 19-year-old lady who needs to rely that when the police turn up, we understand the special needs that she and others have. But if I just hand over to Claire to give some details about the training, because it goes much wider than autism.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, our entire learning and development and college curriculum is developed to ensure that officers are equipped with the skills that they need to engage with and support the diverse range of vulnerabilities that some of our people may encounter. And that means that type of training features across all aspects of what we do. So just by way of some examples, within our student officer development programme, we have modules on public protection and safety, and that includes topics such as domestic violence, missing persons, child protection, sexual offences. Within the foundations of policing, we talk about problem solving, ethical decision making, our code of ethics, human rights, which again all relates to supporting vulnerable people. We also provide assist suicide prevention and intervention training. Then if I move to our probationer officer development programme, our modules on vulnerability, mental health, victim, witness and offender needs, and also child protection and safeguarding, again, cover that topics and equip our officers to deal, with those who are the most vulnerable. We also do training locally, so based on the needs that our local officers and staff identify. Our local training faculty deliver training as well to frontline officers in their roles. Those cover areas such as domestic abuse, missing persons, hate crime, mental health first aid. And we have specific training within our custody training programmes and also crime training that equip officers and staff, particularly around areas such as rape and serious sexual offences. Maybe the final one to mention is that for all officers, you'll know that one of their mandatory training areas is PSP training, and prior to attending that, it's mandatory for all of our officers to do an online learning on acute behavioural disturbance. So again, another area where we ensure that they are well equipped to deal with maybe the most significant incidences that that people may be experiencing. Just to build then as well more specifically on what the Chief has referenced around autism, we do have 4 webinars that are available for all staff and officers around autism, and they look at understanding the characteristics of an autistic person, supporting an autistic employee, the barriers to autistic people and how they may engage with the police service, and understanding how to support those that they encounter. So 3 webinars that were developed with Autism NI, and we are looking to see how we can expand that proposition and ensure that our officers and staff know about those and can use them. Finally, I think maybe just worth referencing that last year we also had an autism reality experience that many of our staff and officers were able to participate in. So essentially that was an autism bus or van that came, and people were able to actually experience what it would be like to arrive in a police station and go through to custody, if they were autistic. I mean, that was a extremely powerful experience. I know the Chief was involved and as was I in experiencing that, and very helpful for those particularly in our local and neighbourhood policing teams. I have to say thank you to our staff associations, these initiatives, and it demonstrates how important it is for us to work with our experts and our staff associations in this area. So our Autism and Disability Staff Association were those who were responsible and helped us set up that training, and we're very grateful for their continued support in this area.
If I just add on quickly around, I mentioned the sensory kits. That actually came from some work in March of last year where our officers reached out for face-to-face interactions with autistic members of the public to ask what their concerns were with regards to reporting crime, being a victim of crime, being a witness to crime, or being stopped by a uniform officer. And it's a result of that feedback that we got these sensory kits. And the sensory kits, they include ear defenders, fidget aids, weighted blankets, and weighted shoulder wraps. And I was shown how these have a huge impact on calming people down, relieving stress and anxiety for them. The work that we did with Autism Northern Ireland was sort of November of last year for those courses. So this is an area that we're extremely committed to. And if I just move to the incident you described, Frank. So from the outset, I want to recognise how unimaginably incredibly difficult a situation this was for everybody. The young woman seen in the video has non-verbal autism, and I cannot even begin to understand, and I certainly do not underestimate, the challenges that she and her families face day in and day out. And my comments now are only intended to clarify the situation with regards to the police response because of the public interest, the commentary that has occurred online, and indeed criticism of what was a very, very short clip of a video. Again, I would say this incident further demonstrates the challenges, the difficulties which police officers find themselves in daily. And it was a distressing and I think challenging situation for everybody concerned, especially of course for this 19-year-old girl and her family. I will say this, having reviewed the body-worn video, the CCTV and the telephone contact, which I'll mention briefly, and I've discussed this with Ryan Henderson at length, and Ryan was the duty chief officer at the time. We're confident that our officers acted professionally and with the intention of resolving the situation, which was very challenging, and keeping everybody safe. So police only intervened physically after this young lady's father tried to physically remove her from the store. Our officers acted out of concern for the safety of both this girl and her father, and one of our officers during the course of doing that was bitten. I actually called each and every officer, and without breaching any private information, one of those officers has 2 children who have autism. The officers were incredibly alive to the challenges of this young lady, and their only interests were of her well-being and her safety. It was a really difficult scenario, and obviously what came out of the online commentary was incredibly unhelpful with regards to confidence of policing in dealing with these issues. And again, it's a demonstration of how selective posting of material online without wider context can, I think, create misinformation and undermine confidence in policing. We issued a press statement in the aftermath of this, but for reasons that I directed, we were quite limited in what we said because of the privacy for this young lady and her family. I did take the decision to notify the Ombudsman of the incident, not because there's any suspected criminality or inappropriate behaviour that would justify any disciplinary proceedings or any issues, but simply owing to the widespread concern and media attention surrounding the video clip. And the Ombudsman, I think, continue to look at this issue. Our primary concern was to rebuild the confidence of those who advocate and support people with autism, which are many people within our own organisation, as described by the sensory kits, because a lot of that confidence would have been shaken by seeing that video and what appeared to be a heavy-handed response. Following the incident, we've held a number of face-to-face meetings with Autism NI, MenCap. We have engaged with a number of political leaders and representatives to explain, as we understand, what happened that day. And I'm very grateful for all those we've engaged with for how they've responded to what we told them about the incident. I continue to support the officers involved in this, and just to give you a sense of this job, and we talked about officers earlier who went into a burning building. These are the same sort of officers who turn up. One officer thought that she was going to be suspended by me, but said all we wanted to do was look after everybody that day. And in advance of us going there, when we understood the nature of the call, there were a couple of calls from the family and the shop, I believe, and Ryan can assist with this. I will open it up to Ryan. We'll be as limited as we should be in this, but we're explaining we're not trained for this. This isn't something we should deal with. And by the way, it highlighted to me, people in education, in communities who deal with people who have had sort of challenges every day, have such a difficult job in dealing with incidents like this, and we should all recognise the brilliant work they do in doing that. I hope that sort of assists of some context of what happened, but I will just ask Ryan if he wants to add anything.
Thanks, Chief, and thanks, Frank, for the question, and really just echo everything that the Chief has said. And I like the Chief, I've watched the video and taken my own view and things, and listened to the call, and I can say, in my view, the officers and call handlers dealt, they were compassionate, they were professional, and you can see actually when you watch just their real reluctance to have to get involved in the way that they ended up having to, trying to de-escalate and work with the family through that. I'll not say much more because, as we've said, it's been looked at by the Police Ombudsman's office, but it does reflect the reality that every day officers are dealing with a huge complexity of vulnerability, some short-term and immediate, where people are in crisis mental health, and those with more long-term conditions, and the range of training, which is a real eagerness for the training that Claire mentioned for mental health first aid training that's funded by the Public Health Agency. We can't get enough chairs in the rooms for those. That is to all frontline officers, and the uptake on it is so high because our staff understand this, how complicated this is, and they want to be as best equipped as they can, Frank, to deal with it. So as the Chief said, he's spoken to the officers and given you a sense of how they were in relation to it. My focus really right from the start and now is because it will no doubt have damaged people's confidence in policing when you see a clip of a video, you hear all of that commentary, particularly if you are a parent of someone who has autism, and indeed our own staff, many of whom will have family who also have autism. So it's really important for us to rebuild that trust and confidence. And the meetings we've had with Autism NI, Men Cap and others have been hugely positive, and they, like we, are entirely committed to seeing what more that we can do to make sure people want to pick up the phone and ring us when they need us, because that's the downside of some of the commentary in relation to this.
Thank you.
Okay, just a word of thanks, Ryan, Chief, and Claire. Thanks, very, very comprehensive answer.
Thank you. And Mark, are you still wanting to come in on this?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the team for that clarification. It's reassuring to hear the breadth and level of training that is being done. Of course, no amount of training can prepare officers for every scenario, and also, of course, not everyone that officers interact with are going to volunteer the information, or their autism mightn't be equally obvious. So it's just the importance of that training being, I suppose, enabling officers to identify signs and adopt approaches to improve outcomes accordingly. Now, in terms of the incident that I suppose prompted this question, and you've referred to, Chief Constable, then, are we confident entirely that officers dealt with that appropriately? And how are you, I suppose, turning the negative publicity that surrounded it into a positive, I suppose, to reassert your commitment to working with and for everyone?
So thanks, Mark. I think firstly the responses today show that commitment. I would hope this is a public forum, and we've obviously done a lot, as both I and Ryan have explained, in reaching out to people to explain the context of what happened. I'm not sure there's much more we can really do. I want to be careful what I say about the particular incident. You asked about my confidence in this. It is being looked at by the Ombudsman. What I'd say about this, listen, I've been in policing 42 years. Every time there's been an examination of anything that I've dealt with, it never says, well, this was the best it could have ever been. There's always something, whether it's a training element or something like that. But having spoken to the officers, having seen what happened, it was a wickedly difficult situation. What I am satisfied is none of the officers did anything at that call, at that incident, from what I could see, that caused me a concern. Can we train them more? Can we train them better? And I said this to Kerry, who leads Autism Northern Ireland. Absolutely. People will comment on what happened in carrying this young lady out of the shop, but that was only done because of what her father was trying to do, and they were going to get hurt between the two of them. So it's really difficult, and there was pressures of the shop obviously wanting to close. We often get caught in the middle of this stuff, but let's wait and see what the Ombudsman says, and obviously we'll react accordingly as well. I can assure you of that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's encouraging the volume of work that has gone on in the background in this very difficult issue. I'm going to move to Tommy O'Reilly with a question on ARAC about attendance management.
Chief Constable, for different reasons, levels of absence amongst police officers remains at levels which, for all of us would agree, are too high. And I think whenever we start to talk about statistics, it's important to remember, I think for all of us, that we don't forget that behind those statistics are individual police officers who, for different reasons, how it ended up, and their health and well-being must remain the priority. However, at the same time, the levels of sick absence are consuming significant financial resources from the police budget. And attendance management is also a significant issue on the PSNI's risk management framework. So, Chief Constable, could you outline for us about the work that's being undertaken to both reduce the actual levels of sickness absence across the organisation, and also what measures are being taken to enhance the control mechanisms within the organisation around attendance management.
So thank you for the question, Tommy, because it's an important question. It's one I would expect the board very much to ask. When I arrived here, I recognised that the sickness levels in the PSNI are higher than I've experienced in policing elsewhere, including in challenging environments in the Met and specialist areas where you would expect sickness levels to be disproportionate. So there is an issue here around sickness. Some of that, I have said publicly, I correlate directly to the numbers of officers we have. You'll recall that last year, tragically, we had 2 suicides in this organisation, and I visited both the families. I keep in touch with the families, and both of those incidents, from everything that I know and from what the families have told me, there was a direct line of sight to the fact that these officers were exhausted but didn't want to go sick to let their colleagues down, because that would just put more burden on what was already a unbelievably stretched workforce. I'm sure there may have been other issues at play, but that's how serious this is around some of our workforce. And I do often say, to have the best policing, we probably need robots, but we haven't got robots, we've got human beings who see things they shouldn't see, deal with things they shouldn't deal with, and face a level of scrutiny that is probably unprecedented for any other profession. So it's a tough job. It's a tough job. There are things that we need to do around sickness monitoring. And when I came in, I asked Pamela, my challenge to Pamela was, we clearly need to take a whole systems approach to this. We need to look at what we're doing to support officers who go sick, but we need to look at how we deal with the monitoring of sickness. And I walked the floors and spoke to a number of frontline supervisors who expressed challenges and difficulties in the monitoring of sickness. So we've got a new plan in place, a new attendance management system, which I'm going to ask Claire to talk about. I will also acknowledge, though, and sometimes these are uncomfortable truths, but I think there is a small number of people who abuse the sickness system, who go sick when they are not sick. And I've made a very clear message to those people before Christmas that I'm coming for them, because that lets everybody in the organisation down. The difficulty is, the High Wire Act is to make sure we encourage people to put their hands up and go sick when they need to, and they don't come to work when it would unduly impact on their health, whilst making sure that those who abuse the system are dealt with. And that's what we are currently doing. But I'll bring Claire in for the detail.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, as the Chief has said, I think the first thing I should say is that we want and we need our officers and our staff to turn up healthy and well to be able to do their jobs, but we also want them to go home healthy and well in the evening to their family and their loved ones. So the approach that we've taken is really 3-pronged. Firstly, we've been investing heavily in wellbeing support, in education and in our treatment services, and I'll say a little bit more about that. Secondly, we've been ensuring that we've got a robust attendance and absence management policy and procedures, and more importantly, that our line managers and our supervisors are confident and capable and have the capacity to be able to manage sickness absence of their team members and to support their team members when they need it. And then finally, we're looking at attendance controls and accountability measures. So we are ensuring that we indeed are holding ourselves to account about as much as we are doing in our compliance with those standards that we're setting out clearly to our workforce. So I'll maybe touch on the first two, and I know the Chief might want to say a little bit more on the attendance controls and accountability measures, but in relation to wellbeing support, education and treatment, in the last 18 months, we've expanded our peer incident support team and our accredited wellbeing volunteer network, and they do fantastic work 24/7 to engage and liaise with our officers and staff on a wide range of wellbeing issues and to support them after traumatic incidents. We've launched a wellbeing app called the Me app, so officers can take responsibility themselves for tracking their own wellbeing and their levels of stress, anxiety or depression, and that signposts them to some other helpful information and initiatives. We've reduced our waiting times for some of our specialist treatment services in occupational health, particularly cognitive behavioural therapy, which is our Tier 1 mental health service. And we've also got new products and training, including trauma impact prevention technique, which is very effective for those who have attended traumatic scenes, so that it avoids future long-term illness or well-being challenges. We've launched a resilience building toolkit, and we've got great programs about the basics of good sleep, nutrition and exercise patterns. Then if I move to the policy and procedure, we've done a considerable amount of work to refresh our attendance procedure, and that's been shaped not just by industry standards, but in line with our regulations, and most importantly, in conjunction with the officers and staff who use this policy day and daily, either because some people do have to take time off because they're sick, and the line managers and the senior managers who have responsibility for managing and supporting their team members. So we are about to launch our new attendance management training package, and that will help line, second line and senior managers understand their responsibilities and equip them with the knowledge and skills that they need to support and manage those who are sick. We've introduced an absence support plan for staff. We are focusing on the key moments of truth in that sickness absence procedure. We used to require line managers to complete about 50 different fields on our SAP HR system when recording absence. And we know that with the busy jobs that they have, the nature of their work and the other responsibilities that they carry, that was just too bureaucratic for them and too much of an administrative burden. So we're focusing in on what I'm calling the 6 moments of truth of that sickness absence management journey. And we've developed a new Pulse dashboard that will track those moments of truth and our compliance with it. And those are things around notification of absence, return to work interviews, providing certification for sickness absence, positive 28-day case review meetings, and ensuring that there are contact plans in place for those who are sick with their line manager on a regular basis. So those are some very positive developments. And then as part of that programme, we're also developed a new training package so that all first line managers and supervisors have the capability and the confidence to deal with what can often be complex sickness absence issues, because we know that a high percentage of our workforce are off with either musculoskeletal or psychological conditions. And then finally, we are exploring some measures that will make our required standards of attendance even clearer to the workforce. And I know the Chief might want to comment a little bit more on those.
Yeah, I'll be very quick on this. So there has to be a bit of carrot and stick, I think, in old-fashioned terms. So one of the things I've asked us to look at is there's something called CRTP. It's the competency related threshold payment that officers receive. But if they're often sick, I'm not sure they should be receiving it. And that might have an impact on some. Eligibility for transfers and promotions. You know, that's another thing, that if you are constantly sick for different reasons, outside of where we know circumstances dictate that people can't be in the workplace for legitimate reasons, but to consider that, and the establishment of district and department attendance support panels, so that we are making sure that we're managing the sickness as well as it should be managed. And importantly, training for sergeants, inspectors, and supporting them, because a number of them have felt that they're not supported by people who have been sick far more than in the view of the supervisors they would expect them to. And there's nothing that is obvious to cause that sickness. And doing spotlight visits to these departments to make sure that we apply good practice. And just to assure the board, you probably know this, but I'm looking around this table now, we all visit officers every week who are going through unimaginable health challenges and issues. And we do everything we humanly can to look after them, acknowledge them, support them. And that's a particular, you know, that's a particular thing that's close to my heart. And I know the officers at this table do that. We're obviously not talking about those people. We're talking about people who should be in the workplace, who shouldn't. And it's a small number, but our workforce expects us to deal with that. And that's what they've asked me to do, and that's what we are going to do. Okay.
Thank you for that answer. Trevor, you wanted to come in on this?
Yeah, and I think actually for the original question, this one, I know, Chief, you know that 2 is too many, But I'm probably like most of the other, particularly elected representatives, there's hardly a week has passed that we don't have officers, both men and women, come to our office. Some of these people are absolutely broken. I had one recently who told me a story. I was going to tears myself, and he told me that he went to commit suicide and thought it was children. And that was only within the last few weeks. I had another one yesterday who said, in terms of, and I mean, I hear what Claire's saying, but I think more needs to be done. One yesterday in my office told me that his line manager got a text. He got a line manager, just text him. And when he got his folder that went to ill health retirement, it's referred to that he was text. I don't think that that is good line management. I don't think that is caring. And I'm not saying that goes for them all. But these officers, and you know this yourself, Chief, it's only by the grace of God that the two is not considerably more. It's only by the grace of God that that's the case. And more needs to be done because these people are broken. Now, and I also accept your remarks, Chief, that some people have abused the system. And I welcome your comments around that, and that needs fixed. But the system is broken for those who genuinely need it.
So I'll deal with the ill health thing because I've formed my view on this because I've met people who've told me that they've abused the system. We've come to an agreement because I wanted candour that they have gone out and there's nothing wrong with them. There are WhatsApp groups that people share information with people saying, look what I've managed to do. 4% of this organisation are going out through ill health retirement. The percentage in England, Wales and Scotland I think is 0.7 of 1%. And I've visited some of these people. Now, I've done a lot in policing, and I'm waiting for the so what bit with some of these people. So there is an element, as you and I both know, Trevor, of abuse, and we need to deal with that. What we can't allow in doing that, in dealing with that, is to distract from those people who are absolutely broken, who need our support. We brought in additional doctors in the last few months to make sure that those waiting lists that you'll have heard stories from some of these officers that are like 9 months, 12 months, they're halved and we're bringing them right down. Because we recognise that this organisation, it's that third pillar of our policing plan. We want to be workforce focused. And actually the people who are legitimately struggling, and it's a really brave thing to put their hands up, they want us to deal with those that are abusing the system because they're blocking up the system as well. But I do recognise your comments, and what I will say, I visit far more officers, as you've just described, who are going through incredibly difficult issues because of what they've seen and done. And they're the ones that we need to make sure we support. But you as a board would expect me to deal with the other cohort, the smaller cohort, and what I'm trying to describe here is we're doing both. Okay.
Okay. Could I suggest that this is a big enough issue for it to be brought back to resources and the presentation that you briefly covered in terms of the issues that have been addressed and the changes that have been brought about are discussed further, and also we'd like to know the impact that they're making since they were introduced at that thing, maybe go away with an action point in that regard. I'm going to move on to Linda Dillon, a question on the Creswell case.
Thank you, Chair. And before I ask my question, I just want to associate myself with the comments made by the Chief Constable in relation to the officers who attended the house fire in Dungannon. They were the first people on the scene, and they did come to that house and put their lives at risk to save the family. And could be dealing with a very different story today in terms of all of the members of that family had they not done that. So I really do want to place recognition for what they did. They put themselves at risk. They did not have to do that. They chose to do it. It was not their job to put themselves at risk, but they chose to do it. And I'm very grateful that they did, because they did save that family's lives. And I'm glad that they're all doing well. Unfortunately, some of the family members are still not very well. So my thoughts are also with those family members. And I'm also glad that somebody has been apprehended and charged in relation to that. So my question, and it's probably directed to yourself, Davy, rather than, is in relation to Jonathan Creswell's history of violent and domestic abuse. When it was identified, was that shared with the pathologist? If so, what specific details were shared with the pathologist, and did this information contain details around his previous history of strangulation of a previous partner?
I'll let Dave, there's some challenges in talking about these cases. You'll remember, Linda, what I've said is, and I meet the family, is anything to do with this particular case I want to speak to the family directly about rather than in the public session. They expressed the frustration about that to me, but I'll let Davey answer that as best as he is able to. And I don't know the answer to that, by the way.
And on that, if the family don't have this information, then I'm content that it isn't answered here today.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best course of action to take today. What I will say is that clearly there was a gap in terms of knowledge, a gap in terms of the identification of a suspect at the time, but clearly we are still in the process of an inquest, and indeed the Minister has announced and commissioned a review by the Department of Justice, which we welcome, and we have committed to fully cooperating with that, and I really welcome it as an opportunity for that multi-agency approach around this case to be considered, and I think there are elements within that around what we did not know as an organisation that perhaps others knew as well. So I think there's a good opportunity within that review to sort of look at some of the wider whole system approach around the information and where we went with that. What I will say in terms of reassurance is that we have identified a number of areas in terms of both recommendations and learning from the case so far. One of those is the passage of information to the coronial process and in particular the pathologist. So we have engaged with the coroner's office, with the pathologist, and we are making changes in terms of the presentation of information and how that wider, if you like, information that we hold may be available then to the pathologist and the coroner in due course. So hopefully that provides a bit of reassurance without necessarily getting into the specific details around the case itself.
Thank you for that. If I can ask a question with a one-word answer, are you aware if the Minister is intending to include other departments, not just other agencies, in terms of this review?
Well, the terms of reference are still to be fully published and agreed, so we'll await that. But my understanding is that it's certainly wider than the police in response to this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nuala, I think you have a supplementary on this.
Yeah, and the Minister said in response to the question on the Assembly floor on Tuesday that yes, it would involve other departments and the Western Trust in particular as well. But I just want to say that I think it's really important that there is engagement from all agencies regarding this case. And in my questions last April and May, I think I did ask similar with regards to the contact between the post-mortem and Jonathan Creswell when it was actually being carried out. So that's something that we need to come back to once the coroner's inquest is over. But I think it's really important that it's not just the PSNI and also other agencies that do fully comply with the review.
Thank you for that. And that's an ongoing theme, that everything falls at the feet of the PSNI, and other agencies tend not to take the same level of responsibility. So, question from Peter Osborne on the recruitment campaign.
Thanks, Chair. Chief Constable, let me ask you about the recruitment, because I think it's a positive news story and you maybe can say a little bit more about it in different ways. Before I ask you that, can I just commend all of the officers who attended the outreach event on the Shankill Road this week? I think it was a very good event. I think that sort of local community engagement leads to better engagement all round, and I know there's other plans for other similar events. Recruitment came up at the meeting. Can you provide us with any more detail of how the recruitment campaign is going? Can I ask you also, are there any inhibitors or barriers to that recruitment campaign, either now or in months ahead, that might restrict the number of officers that can hit the streets as soon as possible? And can I also ask you, and you've touched on this, when police engage with people sometimes at their most vulnerable, it is important in a symbolic sense that they see themselves looking back at themselves in the police service. So especially when it comes to issues such as community and ethnic background or gender or people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, are there particular efforts being made to increase the interest in recruitment from those backgrounds?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And again, I'll just say thank you to the board for supporting the entire recruitment process and campaign. And you all know that last year we did quite a lot of events warming up different communities in advance of the campaign. So it wasn't a sort of a hard stop a hard start, forgive me. We've done a lot of work to try and make sure people were alive to what was happening. I also, and I want to acknowledge the Chair's comments, and I know support the board in calling out the inappropriate and unacceptable posts that circulated on social media when we first launched the campaign. It goes to a certain extent to your question, Peter, in that we have focused on all of the communities in Northern Ireland in trying to seek applicants for this campaign to be an organisation that is representative of the communities it serves. And that includes a cross-section of different groups. And you talked about the event on Monday night, and I raised the issue of people from a working class Protestant Unionist Loyalist background wanting them to apply because there's a disproportionate number not applying now. So there are lots of target groups. Obviously, I'll talk about the nationalist community that we've done a lot of work to secure their confidence they'd apply. And even in my opening remarks, I inevitably made reference to the need for, even if you're thinking this isn't something for me because there might be a vetting issue, you think you are a family member who's been subject to a criminal conviction before, we're not interested in the family member, we're interested in you. And as long as when people apply, they're honest about their background and their history, there's no reason why people can't be police officers in the PSNI, as long as they reach the required standards that we have. I think it's important to say, to give an update as best as I can, and I will bring Bobby in because I think he's done some fantastic work in this area, and Claire. But of those 3,100 applications for the student campaign, the breakdown at the moment, this was at the beginning of this week, so it will have changed. Female applicants were at 38.1%. Catholic applicants were at 28%. Ethnic minorities were at 4.5%. And LGBT plus were at 8.9%. We had 59% of applicants were from Protestant background. And what we obviously want to do, we use that data, and that is only applicants, of course. It'd be interesting to see how that data manifests itself into people who successfully get through the process. But you asked a question about barriers. Barriers will be money, because as we go into years 2 and 3, I think year 1 will be okay. Barriers will always be money, and we need to make sure that we recover this organisation, because that's what we do need to do, and I know the board understands my position on that and supports it. But there is a quality issue. What I've found more and more, and it's a signpost for your activity on social media, I've been concerned about the numbers that we have selected but are then failing the vetting. And a lot of it's to do with social media activity of young people. As politicians, as independents on this board with the responsibilities you've got, you'll be alive to social media and the scrutiny that has. So all I'd say to people thinking of policing, just please be alive to what you're doing on social media. As you will know, I've been in schools recently. I've got about another 8 schools I'm going to go into. This isn't about this campaign. It's probably about a campaign next year or the year after. We don't yet know if we will be having another campaign next year. It'll depend on the recruitment this year, but I think it's very likely that we will. So there's a lot of messaging here to get back to a business as usual with recruitments coming each year for people, which is what you'd expect in an organisation of this size. And that's a healthy thing for an organisation of this size. That's a good thing. I'll hand over to Bobby to talk about some of the real events and the specifics of the different communities we've been targeting. But I want to be very clear. Policing is a profession that's open to everybody and anyone. And it doesn't matter about your academic background. There are certain requirements on that, but we can help with that. And there's a target that people can achieve those requirements, particularly if we reach the position that I want, that we're recruiting every year, so people understand what they need to achieve. Because there's been far too big a gap over 4 years of no recruitment. Bobby?
There's really very little to say after that. The chief's a hard act to follow sometimes, but he's absolutely right. I mean, this is not something that we've just started doing over the last couple of months. It's been a key pillar of the engagement strategy for the last 2.5 years, and we really do now look for every single opportunity that we can get to promote attraction and recruitment to police, and looking at it as a long-term project, not something that's limited to one campaign specifically. And our teams are out there at this particular moment in time very intensively within communities, schools, virtually anywhere we can get ourselves to send a message that policing is open, it's a career for everybody. And what we're really on the hunt for more than anything else is talent. That's the most important thing. We want the best people in our police service. On Peter's point, yeah, quite right, we want to be as representative as we can. And through the real events, we've specifically engaged on the issues that are presenting as barriers to recruitment. And of course, the beauty of doing that through the real events and that engagement as well is that we get to engage the community themselves in trying to come up with solutions for us in terms of tackling those issues. And I think there are potentially some signs already in terms of those early figures that we're getting back that might have led to some dividends for us. So we're delighted about that. Pamela and I, from a strategic perspective as well, are on the road over the next number of weeks as well, up until the close of the campaign. Again, pushing it, but very much thinking about building deeper relationships and foundations for future recruitment as well. And again, I have to say, we found doors open for us and people more than willing to support us, which is hugely encouraging. And we look forward to building on that now going forward.
Just very briefly, thanks for the update. It is a good news story, and the numbers seem to me reasonably healthy. And of course, closing dates are coming up very soon. There are still imbalances, mind you, in the statistics that you gave us, and bearing in mind this may be a longer term process, I suppose there is an issue not just for you, but for other folk on the board or in other communities and local areas to see what we can all do to help improve those numbers too.
Keith, I think you have a supplementary.
I just want to come in quickly, Chief. Something you said about vetting. Can you give us some examples? Obviously, you talk about young people on social media, and that's vetted. Give us some examples of that, which then refuse them to join the police. Without getting into specifics, but some ideas,
Yeah, well, I haven't got specifics, Keith. This is something I went to the vetting team about because I was concerned about the ratios of people not getting through. I'll ask Bobby. Bobby might be able to help with that. But I think it's even liking stuff that wouldn't go with the values of the organisation. It wouldn't sit comfortably with us, which just creates a reason for us to pause. Is this somebody that wanted this organisation? If they've got prejudices, etc. So that's the sort of thing. Social media, is so scrutinised, and I think even if you scrape things off, there are people who can find it, and those people probably work for us. So it's just to have a responsibility around what you're putting on your social media accounts. Just be kinder to each other. That's what I would say, but I don't know if Bobby wants to add anything on that.
Yeah, regrettably, it'll be racism, misogyny, anti-police sentiment typically are the things that would be most problematic and for obvious reasons.
Before you go back, sorry, Chair, before you go back on that, if you look back on someone's likes or comments, and obviously that refers to politicians as well, just for the record.
Yeah, so in terms of the depth that we go to, that's maybe something that we'd need to bring back to a later stage just to give you some further detail on that. But I mean, the message really from today would be for everybody again to think about what they post and what they like, because in particular, if you have aspirations for a future career in policing, it's definitely something that's going to be looked at.
Okay, thank you. And that's very much social media seems to dominate a lot of work around the world today. I'm going to move to the issue of road safety, and we know how difficult that can be when there's an accident or a fatality. It can affect communities, whole villages and families. So Alan, I think you have a question around that.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable, the issue in my question is becoming the subject of an increasing public debate. And the question is, does the PSNI have any concerns that the glare from new generation LED vehicle headlights or the fading central reflective markings on many rural roads could in any way be contributory factors in vehicle collisions?
So Alan, in short, I've not seen any evidence of that, and I'm aware there's a study occurring now. There's actually a discussion on the radio that I heard coming into work the other morning around this. But I'm always grateful for a question like this, because you'll have seen from my report and we constantly make reference to the killed and seriously injured statistics on the roads, both in Northern Ireland and actually on the island of Ireland, which, although slightly improved in some respects last year, still causes huge concern, and we've spoken about that at this board. But we've got quite a bit of data on this, so I'm going to ring Mel in, if I may, just to talk about this in a bit more detail.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Alan. Yeah, we do collect an awful lot of data about both the primary reasons that a collision happens, but also contributory factors. So in the year 23-24, we had 4,977 injury road traffic collisions on our roads in Northern Ireland. Of those, there was only a very small number where the primary reason was dazzled by headlights, but that doesn't split down into LED or normal headlights. So that was only 15 out of that 4,977, which is 0.3%. In relation to road surfaces needing repair, that was a primary causation factor for 7 out of those 4,977, which is 0.1%. We do find we are looking at the long-term data around causes around fatal collisions. There is definitely something about investing in the road infrastructure, and we talk routinely with DFI about those matters to make sure the roads are kept in as good a working order as they can be, and that any defects in the road that have occurred at the site of a collision are very quickly rectified. But I would bring you all back to those fatal 5 that we are publishing on an almost daily basis. And the biggest causation factor of death or seriously injured on our roads is definitely decision making by drivers. So that's decision making of pulling out of junctions, of going for overtakes, of deciding to drive too fast, too close to the car in front, their road positioning. So the driver decision making and driver actions are definitely the most significant issue, very closely followed by excess speed. Speed crops up in many different scenarios in terms of collisions, both fatal and serious injury collisions, along with other things. We are very, very carefully tracking some of the causation factors because the high levels of fatals that we've had on our roads in the past few years. I have talked briefly before about potentially issues around maybe older drivers. There's definitely a trend around sole occupant in vehicle. Maybe that makes people drive worse if they're on their own. But in short, I don't think we're seeing anything around a trend around LED lights or the state of the roads. But we do collate that data and we'll keep it under review. And we'll certainly keep linked in with that national survey that the RAC are doing.
Certainly when I started to research the issue, I thought it was maybe quite a parochial issue, but discovered that in fact that it had been and is the subject of ongoing international debate, and the United Nations Committee has recommended changes to the design of these new headlights from 2027. But I think in the meantime we'll just have to maybe get a good pair of night driving glasses. Thank you.
Thank you. And at the risk of sounding like a nerd, I am aware that many manufacturers have facilities in LED lights that automatically dim down or switch off whenever there's an oncoming vehicle or light on the road. Anyway, that's not to belittle what you're saying, because that's an important issue. Thank you. Moving on to Jerry, you have a question about a recent story in the media.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Chief Constable. You're probably aware, I presume you are aware, because I know other police officers are aware, there was in the paper on the 15th of January, around the funeral was for Kevin Hanaway, who was one of the hooded men. And there was masked, I assume, police officers, and I've asked the question of others, so that's what I was told, police officers, but they were in different uniforms. They hadn't got epaulets with their registration numbers on. I'm going by this story, I wasn't there, so there's no shoulder identification numbers, and the speculation, which has travelled through social media fairly widely, is that MI5 were there. The police spokesperson refused to confirm or deny at the time. I may have missed it, but I did make the point that if this is true, and my understanding is that the MI5 do not have an arresting arm, so if that has changed, we need to know. But really, people need to know if there's a change like that. What was odd about it was that while they were in police uniforms, they weren't the normal police uniforms that you would have seen. So I suppose the question is, were MI5 there? And I'm asking this in public because I haven't seen the police answer to it, and that's why I'm asking the question today. So,
Well, thanks for the question, Jerry, and I think it's helpful anyway to clarify these things, and it also helps me send a very clear message. So police officers deployed to the area for that funeral because of significant community concerns that were made to us that there was a real potential for a paramilitary display to be associated with the funeral or the wake, including the use of firearms. I've made very clear the position of the PSNI on such paramilitary acts, that we'll do everything we can to stop them in advance, and if we don't know about them in advance, we'll go after them afterwards and get the evidence needed and prosecute them. Consequently, an operation was put in place which resulted in 2 arrests and pictures and videos being taken of the officers concerned. I'm very happy to confirm that it's only police officers that were involved in that incident, and it was police officers that had their pictures taken. There was a grunt from me with regards to uniform consistency, but nothing more than that. So I'm happy to address any theories. The operation was managed by Belfast District Council. I was aware of it in advance of what we wanted to do, and afterwards that we'd take the action we needed to take, and they were supported by the crime department. 2 persons were subsequently released without charge, and no firearms were recovered. But the information that we have suggests that the policing operation disrupted the reckless intentions, let's put it that way, of violent, dissident Republicans. And in a way, this is a reminder about the high level of scrutiny that I expect us to face in the police service, particularly here in Northern Ireland. This case again emphasises the risks that officers take day in, day out, particularly from the violent, dissident Republicans as they video and try to identify officers going about the jobs that you'd expect them to do. So these were police officers in that picture and nobody else from any other organisation. I hope that helps.
thank you for that clarification. Chief Constable, could I just ask because there isn't, I mean, the reason that police officers don't wear, and especially in certain units, don't wear their names is for their own safety. But that's why the registration number is there. So if there is a complaint or if somebody wants to say this is what happened to me, then they can identify the person without identifying them, if we could put it that way. Was that a deliberate action? I suppose what part of the question is it a special unit? Is it a different unit for the board?
Jerry, it's nothing. Disorder? It was a mistake by the officers. They should have had the unit. I was grumpy about that. It's been addressed and it's no more than that. Honestly, there's no special unit. There's nothing like that happening. I knew what was going to happen. I wanted a police operation. I wanted to stop it. And the officers didn't have the correct uniform on. And when I saw the pictures, I imagined the conspiracy theories, but I hope I can put that to bed now. And that will not happen again with regards to the uniform.
Okay, thank you. And the last thing, because it may be my mistake, was there this type of information put out before now? Because that happened a number of weeks ago.
Sorry, with regards...
Sorry, publicly? What you're telling me now, was it put out publicly? I may have missed it, which is why I'm asking you.
I'm not aware. I'll ask Bobby. I honestly don't know. I think at the time, I don't think we ever would have, done this, neither confirm nor deny. I don't know there's a breakdown in communication with our comms, but maybe Bobby can help me with that.
Yeah, I think that piece in the story didn't help the situation. That line around neither confirm nor deny. I don't believe that was in our statement, and that's something that...
In fairness, it wasn't. It said... sorry, please, spokesperson, just give it to you now. Because I don't want to misrepresent. Yeah. A spokeswoman said a number of vehicles were stopped and searched in the West Belfast area on Thursday, January the 9th, by officers under the Justice and Security Act 2007, and that was it. But yeah. I mean, it then went a wee bit. I don't want to exaggerate, but it certainly went across.
Yeah, later, I think in the story, there's reference to the term neither confirm nor deny, which again didn't come from our statement, but in the circumstances, I think only compounded the issues with it, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're moving to our last couple of questions. One from Trevor here on attendance of police officers at hospitals.
Chief Constable, quite rightly today, and in terms of your report, you're addressing the right care, right person stuff, and I know that Ryan's been leading in that. You did say you didn't want to talk about money. I don't really want to talk about money either, but in your report, and it's referred to us quite often, certainly as public representatives again, about whenever they go to the A&E, the number of police officers are in attendance, and quite rightly in your report, you refer to the cost at £4 million per annum. I think the public don't expect the police to be doing what they're doing. You don't expect the police to be doing what they're doing. So I suppose where I'm trying to find out how far Ryan's on down that road in terms of trying to address this, that we can, in your words from last week, arrest the situation to try and reverse the trend of the £4 million spend.
Ryan's desperate to answer the question, so I'm going to hand it over to him.
Thanks, Trevor. And yeah, the figures that you're referring to were based on some really good data we were essentially measuring the time that officers were spending in hospitals and turned that into a money value across Northern Ireland. It's really significant. You can see that within it. We always knew from the start of this work that it wasn't something that the police we could just walk away from, because those officers are there because they'll have utilised their powers in the main under the Mental Health Act to bring somebody in for assessment. And then the time taken to get that assessment, which requires a GP and especially trained social worker, that time has increased and increased. Average is probably around 12 hours waiting to get that through. Add into that at the moment, I mean, everyone is so aware of the blockages that there are in terms of EDs, getting people into wards and then out into the community. All of these things are interconnected and lead to the delays within the hospital. I think the good news is that everyone recognises it's a problem, so it's not just Ryan and the Chief and others saying, and our officers saying that this is an issue. The Department of Health recognise it's an issue. The Health Minister, the Justice Minister and the Chief Executive of each of the health trusts, and that's why there is now in place the multi-agency task and finish governance to actually look specifically at the issues of handover, the issues of utilisation of the powers that are in, trying to bring that process to a much more short and simple approach to it. And indeed, we're looking really soon at doing a pilot in the Craigavon Hospital area based right upon that. It's a difficult time to do it, Trevor, because we all know the pressures that the health sector is under. This is one of many problems that are interconnected, and I understand that that is that way. So I would love to see it happening quicker and sooner, but I know we're in part of the system. But it's absolutely right to highlight again that this is not what the public want the police officers doing. They want them running towards danger when others are running away, and when they're sat in the hospital, that's not happening.
I hear what you're saying, Ryan, and I appreciate it's not easy to fix. However, the Chief hasn't been shy in reminding us about how the budget for health has continued to escalate out of kilter with the PSNI. So if the health service is not moving quick enough, then is there not an opportunity to try and go for recovery of costs? Because, I mean, if the time is taking longer for GPs or doctors to come to free up your officers, then is there not an opportunity then to actually go for a cost recovery in some of those cases?
So I won't get into cost recovery now, although, there's lots that I could say about this, even when Charles Little, who obviously, forgive me, Charles is the son-in-law of Marjorie and Michael Caldry, who were murdered in 2017 by Thomas McKenzie. When we had a meeting with Health, he said, "You're not the front line of mental health services." He is, pointing towards me and the officers. You will know with Right Care, Right Person that a number of police services in England and Wales have applied it. We are going to apply it. Ryan's done a huge amount of work on this. I actually want it in by the end of the calendar year. But we have a broader responsibility around our relationship with other public services, particularly health. So I said to Ryan, I'd like to see this introduced in April. So that's a timing for you that we are heading for. I will say, I think health started off very resistant to the position, and they're far more now nuanced to accepting that what we're saying is reasonable and fair. The cost recovery bit is not something I've considered because I want us all to try and play nicely, basically, rather than cause more bureaucracy. And cross-charging, I find, certainly in the policing world, it costs you more to cross-charge than get the money you're actually going for. So give us a bit of time, Trevor, and I'm sure we're going to get there. Okay.
Thank you. That highlights once again the importance of cross-agency cooperation from other organisations. I've got one question from Mark Durkan on police officer numbers.
Thank you, Chair. No, we spoke earlier about recruitment, and we know the implications of inadequate office numbers on policing and on people. Trevor's question there and your response touched again on the financial challenges facing yourselves as well as others. But are you any closer on alignment of views with DOJ on future officer numbers?
In short, no. But what I've said, Mark, and you all know this place infinitely better than I, Rome wasn't built in a day. To get the agreement around the 7,000 police officers, the 2,572 police staff in the recovery plan, that's there. We all know that's a de minimum position for us. I've actually got meetings later this week, tomorrow, on how I will evidence what this organisation needs. But a bit like the answer with Trevor around health, I want to bring everybody into the tent around the explanation of why I can justify the future-proof for probably the next 2 decades, the organisational numbers of the PSNI, both from a police officer and police staff perspective. You know, we had the report from Leapwise. You know the work that we've done with Crest. There are other pieces of work. There's obviously a transformation agenda in England and Wales around police, and there's lots of work that we can point to help us evidence what our numbers should be. What I would offer to you is the number of police officers should be far closer to 8,000, if not over that, than anywhere near 7,000. But I think in the period of the recovery plan and the recruitment, we will reach an agreement, this is my ambition, with the executive and with the Department of Justice and indeed with Westminster about what our workforce strength would be. And then we'll get funded for it beyond the 3-year period of the recovery plan. And this all fits into the estates plan for the organisation, all of the things that we need to put in place to make sure the foundations are there for the next 2 decades of this organisation.
Thank you, Chief Constable. And I know you were rebuked for your own direct approach to Westminster on that. And sorry if I've missed it, but did you ever receive a response?
I did receive a response and I continue to engage.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, to all of the members for your questions. And thank you, Chief Constable, for your responses and for being here today to give us a frank response to all of our questions. Could I also thank those online who have joined us, and just to say that whether we're on the policing board or whether we're PSNI officers in this room, we have one common aim, and that's for security and protection of the public, and that's our aim. Ultimately, that's the common goal that we all strive for. So our next meeting is on Thursday, the 6th of March. So same time, see you then.